Let's bring in CTV political commentator Scott Reid, who's been following the story very closely. Your initial reaction to what David Johnston had to say today, Scott?
Well, a number of his conclusions are comforting, and insofar, even those where he finds fault, it's comforting to hear someone of his stature say, look, there are gaps in terms of the way these kinds of matters are collected, the way this sort of intelligence is communicated and structured to the political level, even to other ministries and other departments and other agencies. All of that's reassuring. It's reassuring to hear him say what I think many of us believed, which is, yes, there's lots of effort to interfere with our elections and our democratic processes, but none of them have been terribly successful so far. I think what's fundamentally challenging about this set of recommendations, though, is it does not answer the overweening political imperative. I mean, the truth of the matter is this has become a matter of public confidence. And that may be fair and that may be unfair. That may not be fair to those who work in our national security agencies, and it may not be fair to the prime minister. But that's where we're at. And I just think, for David Johnston to recommend that there will not be a public inquiry, but that there will be public hearings, and that he will chair those public hearings, it just means that we end up in the worst of all possible worlds politically, because that process, as we've heard already from Pierre Poilievre, with his barbed wire response, is going to be deemed illegitimate. And so it will not advance public confidence. You will end up with those people that trust Trudeau will be fine with it. Those people who didn't will not. But there is a higher imperative here. And I think Mr. Johnston missed the mark. At this point, a public inquiry was the only way that you were going to satisfy people. There was going to be an independent and objective examination of these answers, even if that meant that they simply validated his own conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, the argument here that given the optics and the politics, well, a public inquiry would be the best solution, Scott, to clear the air and just to make sure there's no appearance of a conflict of interest. And as Pierre Poilievre said, he doesn't trust David Johnston to be independent. There's a conflict of interest. He's not impartial, or so Pierre Poilievre is saying.
I find Mr. Poilievre's characterization of David Johnston to be borderline venomous. I think it really, really takes you right up to the line of character assassination. But set that aside. This is where we're at. And if you're in the Prime Minister's office, you don't have the luxury of managing the world as you would like it. You must manage the world as it is. And I think that Johnston himself probably had an obligation to recognize that if he believed there needed to be public hearings, he should have concluded with a full dose of self-awareness that his position to chair those meetings and have them be seen credible by anyone who wasn't already a supporter of the Trudeau government, that simply had been lost. And he should have asked someone else to do the job. So I really think that the government finds itself in a situation where it's got a number of answers. Many of them are very informative and interesting, but it's not going to solve the fundamental issue of public confidence. And this thing has been running since February. Today means that it will continue to run.
The difference, Scott, just in layman's terms for me and folks at home, between a full-scale public inquiry, which the Conservatives, the Bloc, the NDP have all been asking for, an inquiry versus public hearings. What's the difference?
An inquiry would have terms of references. It would have terms of reference that would permit it to look at national security matters. It would be more of an examination of what occurred and were there gaps and were there failings. It would validate objectively. It would validate the conclusions that former Governor General David Johnston reached when he said that he did not detect any interference that was successfully conducted in our elections, nor did he detect any political interference in our own domestic affairs. And so I think all those things would be reassuring. He points out, and he's so right to point out, that it would be very challenging because you're dealing with national security matters and you can't read out raw intelligence that's been collected by an ally. Of course, you can't do that. I do believe, however, there would have been ways to structure an inquiry. I think back to the O'Connor inquiry into the Mahara Rar affair. It dealt with national security matters. It dealt with Five Eyes intelligence that we gained from our allies, and it managed to reach conclusions that in the end had the effect of reassuring the public about how we were managing a matter of national security and grave sensitivity.
One last question about the public. How does this now play with Canadians watching at home, Scott? David Johnston advising against a public inquiry.
Well, here's one of the peculiar things about this issue. I'm not convinced that this is an issue that drives the electoral choices of Canadians for the next election. And that, I think, colors this issue in a weird way, because I think, for example, If you're in the Prime Minister's office, you might say, man, this is what we call a beltway issue. This obsesses the media and opinion leaders. It dominates the front page of the Globe and Mail and what we talk about on CTV News, but it's not a bread and butter issue, the price of gas or the price of groceries. And therefore, let's not get led around by our nose. But I would argue that this is an important matter of public trust. You do want to satisfy people's concerns in that regard. It is substantively an important matter. And finally, I would argue that if you're going to have public hearings, and you're going to have witnesses, and you're going to have constant media coverage, and you're going to have difficulty getting your own agenda listened to because people are talking breathlessly about what they heard yesterday at those public hearings. You're getting all of the grief of a public inquiry without any of the benefit or credit that comes with people saying, they've invited an independent and thorough examination of their own actions. So I really do think in the end, public hearings without a public inquiry are kind of the worst of all political worlds for Justin Trudeau and this government.
Scott Reid, CTV political commentator. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.